Well, let's try that one more time. We had some technical difficulties there that got in the way of that earlier attempt there at doing our weekly News Project live show. So let's try this one more time. I'm sorry for that. Andrew McKeever here, the news director of GNAT-TV's News Project, and we are doing our weekly wrap up of some of the major news on our News Project live show. As I was saying before, we were rudely interrupted by Facebook's apparent inability to keep up with us here. Um, schools are School reopenings are the major focus of what we started off last week, and again this week is also kind of the top story. We're kind of following so much writing on how schools are able to reopen and the education they're going to be able to provide both in class, in person, and remotely. Most schools seem to be adopting a bit of a hybrid approach where some days of the week students will be in class, other days they'll be learning remotely, but there's a wide range of different options that are going to be uh, in play. So if you are a parent of a student who's somewhere in the kindergarten through 12th grade range, you'll obviously want to be in touch with the school administrators of that school and just be as informed as you can about that. We're trying to do our part here by bringing you some additional information. We did a discussion with the heads of school of the Maple Street School, Long Trail School, and Burn Academy, which you can find on our website, gnat-tv.org. We also did an interview show yesterday with the superintendents of the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union and the Battenkill Valley Supervisory Union. That would be Randy Lowe and William Basic. So we got to hear from them about how they're approaching the very complicated problem of how to reopen schools safely. There really is an awful lot to drill down through all of this, so won't take the time right now, but you'll be able to watch that program very shortly on GNAT TV's website, in addition to being able to watch it on our channels, now located at 1074, 1084, and 1094. This, of course, is a part of a much larger national conversation that we're seeing, where schools in some other parts of the country that have been much less fortunate than Vermont has been in terms of the infection rate are really struggling to figure out a way to open their schools safely. And even right here in Vermont, it's not the case that everyone's just going to be able to go back to school more or less as normal. Just to the north of us, the Mill River School District announced earlier this week that they're going to be starting off the year fully remote. So we'll be watching how that plays out very carefully as well. Kind of related to that, we're seeing an enrollment spike of sorts happening in some of the local school districts. Winhall School District is seeing a spike of about 30 or so additional students enrolled in their district, which of course is a non-operating district. They don't operate their own school. They tuition all their students out to other schools elsewhere in the vicinity. Many of them come to Burn and also Maple Street, as well as there are the Mountain School in Winhall. But as a non-operating district, they don't have a whole lot of control over their budget in that sense. So 30 kids, additional kids coming into their district, which for a lot of districts would be great news, means that there's a lot more upward pressure on their school budget and their financial situation, which eventually translates into tax rates sooner or later. We saw that situation unfold a couple of years ago when they had another spike in enrollment. So they're hoping that the legislature can help them out a little bit here, and they're talking to their legislators about maybe waiving the penalty provision for their fiscal year 22 and 23 budgets, and also requesting that the legislature make a statutory change by which the homestead rate, when the homestead tax rate reaches the non-homestead tax rate, both rates would increase in unison to help support the budget. So Obviously, another story which we'll be following, and one which I'm sure is not just limited to Winhall. VT Digger had an interesting story about a similar enrollment spike that's going on in the not so far away town of Dover, which is the home of Mount Snow. A lot of folks apparently moving out of major urban areas to come to Vermont, and maybe they're already second homeowners. Maybe they're people who are coming to Vermont because they've heard that relative to where they may be coming from, the COVID-19 situation is in much better shape. So again, an interesting story which we'll be looking at as we go forward in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, back here in Manchester, the Bournebrook Echo Retreat proposal for an inn at the end of Benson Road, off of East Manchester Road. Hearing was held by the Manchester Development Review Board on Wednesday. Very lengthy discussion. Did not conclude. The hearing is recessed until September 2nd, so it's going to be more to hear about that. It's a proposal for an inn and a restaurant. Let's see, lodging for about 90 or so guests and restaurant seating for maybe 30, although there's been some tweaking of the original proposals gone on. Their proposal has encountered some controversy from local residents who are concerned about traffic and noise and having that in an area which right now is very quiet and remote. So again, we'll follow that one along. Interesting proposal and interesting situation unfolding there. There would be a conditional use, if approved, in that zoning district, which is in the Rural Agricultural and Forest Conservation District. So more to come on all of that. And again, the hearing will be reconvening on September 2nd. Not really breaking news to anyone who's following local politics, but next Tuesday, August 11th, is the state primary day. If you haven't voted by mail yet, it's probably too late for that. State officials were hoping that you would have your ballot in the mail by earlier this week. So if you're planning to go to the polls, like you might have done a million times in the past couple of years, you'll just want to be sure that you'll understand what your procedure is, because some polling places will be drive-by polling, and others have been moved from their more familiar locations. So just want to be aware of all of that. Been a huge increase in the number of mail-in ballots, 1,000%, I believe I saw one number. So more people mailed in, way more people mailed in ballots than even voted in the 2018 election. So going to be an interesting thing to watch. The state primary obviously involves races from the governor's race on down. In the Republican primary, it'll be kind of interesting to see how John Clark, who's a relative unknown and a newcomer to state politics, is challenging incumbent Governor Phil Scott. Governor Scott obviously opted not to campaign a whole lot, saying that he had to focus his attention on managing the COVID-19 pandemic and its response. But it's kind of an interesting situation because the Republican ballot gets pretty thin after the lieutenant governor's race. There aren't a whole lot of candidates on the ballot for either statewide offices like the Secretary of State or the Treasury Secretary, much less state representative races like right here in our area. There are no Republican candidates for state representative. There are of course three folks running in the Democratic primary. So it may be that a lot of folks who might be planning to vote for Governor Scott, if he gets past the Republican primary and winds up in the ballot in the November general election, won't be voting for him in the Republican primary, and that gives Mr. Clark some kind of an opening. Whether or not that's enough to pull off what would be a gigantic political upset or not, we will have to wait and see until Tuesday evening or maybe Wednesday morning, depending on how long it takes to count all those votes. But in any event, we'll be watching that race, obviously. And also on the Democrat side, we have Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman facing off against former Education Secretary Rebecca Holcomb and a few other candidates. hard to forecast that one. Um, Lieutenant governor race is actually some of the more interesting areas to look at, both on the Republican and Democrat side. There are a lot of candidates, 4 or 5 in each party, uh, in the running. So we'll see if the person who probably started off the lieutenant governor's race thinking he was going to probably uh, prevail. That would be State Senator Tim Ashe, who is the Senate pro tem, but has faced a rather strong challenge from political newcomer Molly Gray, who currently is an assistant attorney general, relative unknown, but she's garnered a lot of support from some of the Democratic Party establishment, one might say, including former governors Madeline Kunin and Peter Shumlin, and has also raised a lot of money, more than Tim Ashe has. So that's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. On the Republican side, we have Scott Milne, who ran for governor in 2014 and almost beat then incumbent Peter Shumlin, facing off against several other people in the running, including Meg Hansen, who is from Manchester and is making her first try for public office. So we will be following all of that closely, posting the results as quickly as we can get them onto our Facebook page. So if you're one of those folks who has to know immediately who's won and who hasn't, stay tuned to GNAT-TV Tuesday evening, and we'll get that information out to you as fast as we possibly can. I should also mention local Representative Linda Joy Sullivan is also competing for the state auditor position. She's running for that seat, as well as running for re-election as a state rep from the Dorset, Danby, Landgrove, Peru area. So it'll be interesting to see how that race turns out. Otherwise, just to wrap up, at today's press conference, the governor holds on every Friday. The main announcement was they had launched a new grant program to help mitigate operational expenses and losses for childcare providers who were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic earlier this year. Many childcare providers stepped up to stay open and provide childcare for folks who really needed it at the time, essential workers and others. So this $12 million that comes from the Federal CARES Act money will go towards helping them pay off some of the bills they might have picked up during that time when things are really tough. One other note, I'll just mention that Jim Baker, who many of us know, our local Arlington resident, is now taken on an important role overseeing the state's prisons and prison facilities. Gave an update on the COVID-19 outbreak amongst Vermont prisoners who are incarcerated in a facility down in Mississippi. As I'm sure most of you know, that went from about 6 people to I think 146 was the number I heard. And the folks at that facility in Mississippi, and obviously state officials here are very concerned about that. And Mr. Baker gave an update on that situation. It sounds like at least it's stabilizing at that admittedly very high level. Finally, on a lighter note, the Arlington Farmers Market is on today, as it is every Friday afternoon from 4 to 7 p.m. there in front of the Arlington Inn at the corner of 313 and 7A. So if you got the time to run down there and give yourself a chance to pick up some fresh local produce, go for it. Well, that'll do it for us for today. Again, my apologies for our initial little hiccup there on the technical front, but we'll see you again next Friday, and have a great weekend, everybody, and of course, stay safe. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.